Nazis?
Yesterday, Vice President JD Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller visited the National Guard at Union Station in Washington, D.C., attempting to justify their deployment of the military on the streets against American citizens under the false premise of reducing crime in a city where crime is already down 30%. Instead of investing in community policing, drug rehabilitation centers, and housing, their solution is to militarize the city, bring in the National Guard at huge expense, and scare people into submission with Nazi-style threats. The people of D.C. don't want them there. Businesses are hemorrhaging money as people are afraid to go out, and of course they'll claim that crime is down because of it, just as they did during the pandemic lockdown. But what's the real story behind this fascistic form of authoritarianism under the Trump regime? Ultimately, it's voter suppression. As the midterm elections approach next year, Trump will have realized his dream of dismantling sanctuary cities from the hands of mostly black and brown mayors, and will claim that their illegal use of sanctuary status goes against his America First policies or some shit like that. Remember, there's significant voter suppression happening in many Republican states already, from Texas redistricting to voter roll purges of 500,000 Americans in Georgia to Florida's election police unit, supposedly designed to crack down on non-existent voter fraud in the nation's third largest state. And what fuels much of these fascist policies is racism, white supremacy, the great replacement conspiracy theory, aside from abject cruelty.
You have vagrants, you have drug addicts, you have the chronically homeless, you have the mentally ill who harass, who threaten violence, who attack families, and they've done it for far too long. This should be a monument to American greatness. But if the President of the United States thinks that he has to extend this order to ensure that people have access to public safety, then that's exactly what he'll do. If he thinks he doesn't have to do that, obviously he'll make that determination. But we talk about human rights. We hear these people outside screaming, "Free D.C." Let's free D.C. from lawlessness. Let's free Washington, D.C. from one of the highest murder rates in the entire world. Let's free Washington, D.C. so that young families can walk around and feel safe and secure. That's what we're trying to free D.C. from. And as Stephen said, it's kind of bizarre that we have a bunch of old, primarily white people who are out there protesting the policies that keep people safe when they've never felt danger in their entire lives. We've got moms and dads and young families. Shouldn't they be able to enjoy public spaces without vagrants taking away basic public safety from the American citizenry? The fact that it's taken so long to bring common decency and law and order back to Washington, D.C. is an indictment of a generation of failed leadership.
The way they talk about homeless people as vagrants, or look down on mentally ill people, or get their knickers in a twist about graffiti, is a clear expose of their purposeful hatred of the poor, the unhoused, the compromised, the disabled. You know, humans. They forget that many of the people they denigrate were once financially stable, housed, sober, and that humanity is flawed and that we are not all perfect, like they are. Trump finds millions of dollars to go golfing or organize a pointless summit in Alaska, but will never use public money for the public good. Trump has made 99 visits to his properties, including 62 to his own golf courses, a 37% increase from last term. That cost the taxpayer over $30 million. The eradication of the marginalized is what this toxic white male dominance craves. Their vision of a utopian nation is a white wealthy one, where anyone who doesn't fit their demographic is either arrested or imprisoned or simply scared into the shadows. Miller's claim that hippies and communists are the ones shouting "Free D.C." and "From D.C. to Palestine, occupation is a crime" is typical of his Nazi propaganda.
There are residents who lived in Washington, D.C. their entire lives. Their parents lived here, their grandparents lived here, and they have lived for generations in intolerable conditions of crime and decay. 99% of this city has been terrorized by 1% of the city. And the voices that you hear out there, those crazy communists, They have no roots. They have no connections to the city. They have no families they are raising in this city. They have no one that they are sending to school in this city. They have no jobs in this city. They have no connections to this community at all. But they're the ones who've been advocating for the 1%, the criminals, the killers, the rapists, the drug dealers. And I'm glad they're here today. Because me, Pete, and the Vice President are all going to leave here, and inspired by them, we're going to add thousands more resources to this city to get the criminals and the gang members out of here. We're going to dismantle those networks, and we're going to prove that a city can serve for the law-abiding citizens who live there. We are not going to let the communists destroy a great American city, let alone the nation's capital. And let's just also address one other thing. All these demonstrators that you've seen out here in recent days, all of these elderly white hippies, they're not part of the city and never have been.
Remember, Wisconsin Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy rocketed to public attention in 1950 with his allegations that hundreds of communists had infiltrated the State Department and other federal agencies. McCarthy was eventually censured by his Senate colleagues, ostracized by his party, and ignored by the press. If only they'd ignore the man in the tan suit. When asked why troops were stationed at Union Station instead of neighborhoods with higher crime rates, Vance argued that the hub was overwhelmed with vagrants, drug addicts, the chronically homeless and the mentally ill, claiming visitors no longer felt safe there. He described the site as a monument to American greatness and insisted, "We do not have to live like this." Stephen Miller struck a harsher tone, dismissing the demonstrators as crazy communists. He said, "We're going to ignore these stupid white hippies who all need to go home and take a nap because they're over 90 years old. We're going to get back to protecting the American people and the citizens of Washington, D.C. What, so those 90-year-olds are not American people? Again, marginalizing and denigrating, in this case, the elderly. Trump federalized the city's police force the previous week. He directed Hegseth to deploy nearly 1,900 National Guard troops. Trump justified the move as part of a crackdown on crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor in what he described as a lawless capital, despite the statistics showing violent crime at a 30-year low. Most of the troops sent to Washington are from Republican-led states, including Louisiana and South Carolina. Soldiers are seen patrolling downtown locations such as the National Mall, major metro stations, with their tanks lined up outside tourist areas. This military push was launched just 2 months after Trump's Los Angeles operation, which marked an expansion of what critics inside and outside government describe as a domestic shock and awe campaign. That phrase, borrowed from U.S. military strategy in Iraq, is now being applied to the president's effort to showcase overwhelming force on American soil. Trump and his aides are making it clear this won't stop with D.C. or L.A. They are openly considering similar deployments elsewhere, brushing aside crime statistics, laws, and legal constraints. In their view, the president can act at will, including using the military for political advantage and intimidation. Senior officials confirmed that planning was already underway. "Make no mistake, this is just the beginning," declared Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia and longtime Trump ally and Fox News host, at a press conference on Monday. Trump warned that if he and his advisors deemed it necessary, other Democratic-led cities would face the same treatment. Among the examples he named were Chicago, Oakland, and Baltimore. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker compared Trump's threats to the Nazi dismantling of Germany's Democratic Republic. For years, Trump has shown interest in using the armed forces at home to advance his political goals. The recent actions in Los Angeles and Washington appear to be steps towards normalizing that vision, whether targeting Democratic jurisdictions, enforcing his immigration agenda, or driving unhoused people out of public spaces. On Monday, he promised to clear homeless encampments from all over our parks, so the capital would not be, in his words, a wasteland for the world to see. According to current and former aides, one of Trump's biggest regrets from his first term was not deploying military power more aggressively during the pandemic and the BLM protests. At the time, he even floated the idea of opening fire on demonstrators near the White House. That idea was ultimately rejected by Pentagon leadership.
I recently received a letter from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. It purports to notify me that Washington State, and these are her words now, has been identified as a so-called sanctuary jurisdiction. That's her line. By the way, on grounds that her letter makes no effort whatsoever to explain. She refers to unidentified policies and practices within Washington State that she asserts violate federal law. Once again, without any explanation whatsoever. The letter goes on to invoke federal obstruction, conspiracy, and harboring statutes that carry criminal penalties with prison time. Bondi even threatens that state officials, including some of the folks who joined me today, by the way, just so we're clear, even threatens that state officials, and I'm quoting now from her letter, operating under the color of the law, using their official position to obstruct federal immigration enforcement efforts and facilitating or inducing illegal immigration may be subject to criminal charges. That is breathtaking. Washington State will not be bullied or intimidated by threats and legally baseless accusations. In the America that I love, I have taught my children to revere, we resolve our differences peacefully through public discourse and, if necessary, through the courts, not by threatening political opponents with imprisonment. Her letter threatens me, police officers, state troopers, sheriffs, judges, and other officials with prison time. Why? Because our state legislature passed a bipartisan law that appropriately and lawfully limits the diversion of state and local resources to federal immigration enforcement. By threatening criminal prosecutions of state officials, this letter embarrasses and disgraces the office of the United States Attorney General. Washington State is proud to be a welcoming community that values immigrants and refugees' contributions to our economy and our cultural fabric. We do so while accounting for and complying with applicable federal law.
Plans for a second-term federal takeover of DC's police have reportedly been in the works for years. Trump's advisors have drawn up detailed playbooks for scaling up militarized crackdowns nationwide, not just in the capital. And this time, with Pete Hegseth by his side, he doesn't have the Pentagon to stop him. Trump and his legal team have been finding workarounds to enable the military being used against American citizens. One senior administration official said things don't have to be done the way they've always been done, underscoring Trump's objective is to normalize military deployments in U.S. cities. Trump keeps close tabs on how the deployments are portrayed on television, especially on his state regime news channel Fox. The Republican National Committee is also amplifying his message, portraying D.C. as a lawless hellhole and framing the Guard deployment as the only way to protect residents. But crime statistics and Trump's own record, including pardons for January 6 rioters who assaulted police, suggest that this campaign is less about public safety than consolidating political power. With a loyal team now surrounding him, Trump has more freedom than ever to wield the military at home for partisan ends and to cling to power by whatever means, even by force. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.